LIV Golf. I mean, back in February, it was dead in the water, was the general sense of the situation. And here we are in November, and it's just finished season one, and frankly has a field of players that most of us did not see coming. And to reflect on season one of the new LIV Golf Tour, very happy to say we're joined by Rex Hoggard, who is a reporter of 20 odd years, I would say, Rex, with the Golf Channel and counting. I don't want to age you, but you're very welcome.
20 odd, yes, I'll leave it at that. That's kind. Thank you.
So let's work our way backwards for a moment then. You went to the season finale, the team season finale in Doral, which of course was a mainstay on the PGA Tour for so many years, and Donald Trump is the owner there. So you went to have a look at this LIV Golf, this last LIV Golf event of the season. I presume you would have attended a PGA Tour event at Doral many times. How does it compare in tone, in scale, in attendance, in general vibe?
It was different. Yeah, I remember sort of the glory years of the Doral event. And I don't even know if it was the World Golf Championship years when it became the American Express for a little while. I think it was around the 4 championship years when it was still a full field event. And the organizers just turned it into a party. That's when I thought it was at its best. So it wasn't close to that. It wasn't the party. It wasn't the atmosphere that you've come to expect. Although the crowds were very, very good on the weekend. I actually went home on Friday, but I talked to some colleagues who hung around for Saturday and Sunday. And I think it was actually interesting to see some of the players who hadn't been back. Dustin Johnson being the primary example here. I mean, he'd won at Doral when it was a PGA Tour stop. And I think for him, it was kind of comfort food. He was able to go back and he was quite relaxed.
Mm. How do we assess year one of LIV? I guess there are various metrics to touch upon. First off, you'd have to say the field, I don't know about you, but a field that suddenly has Cam Smith and very much a rejuvenated Dustin Johnson and Brooks Koepka and Bryson DeChambeau and Patrick Reed and even Mickelson and Westwood and Poulter and McDowell, I guess, has a certain name recognition. That completely surpasses every expectation that we might have had in February, March.
I think I love the way you set this segment up, talking about 6, 7, 8 months ago. It was hard to imagine we would be here. And I'm talking about Doral at their tour championship when they made it through what was at least a semi-successful season, at least the way they're defining it. And I think when you look back, I think that was the idea amongst the players. Certainly Phil Mickelson put words to this. Go back to February when Phil's own comments almost made the whole thing unravel. That, you know, what he told the Fire Pit Collective and the quotes that were ran about, he was critical of both Saudi Arabia, where the money's coming from, the Public Investment Fund, as well as the PGA Tour. It was hard to imagine going forward. So among players, there was certainly a sense of accomplishment that, yes, that this started out rocky and it's been a tough year. I think everybody was sort of looking forward to what's to come next, which is 2.5 months off, which pro golfers never get. But it was also a chance to reflect on what has been sort of a difficult climb for them, but in a lot of guys' eyes, a rewarding climb.
Mm. What about the formats? So the team event aspect and, in spite of their terribly naff names, that's certainly been one of the things that the LIV Golf players, and I'm sure they've been briefed to do so to a certain extent or other, but that's something that the players have been effusive about. The organisers say it's the real point of difference with the PGA Tour. I mean, what have you made of the team aspect of LIV? It's I guess one of the main, like I said, points of difference. I don't know to what extent any of it's caught the public imagination, but what's your sense of where it could go, the team aspect?
I don't think it has caught the public attention, at least not yet. And I don't know where it goes from here. And you're right. It kind of starts at the names. We're all kind of silly and hard to wrap your mind around. And it goes from there. I will say, having a chance to talk with players and officials, there is an element to this which is intriguing, I think, at least here in the United States for your average sports fan. And I was just talking about this with a colleague of mine, that it's the transaction that your average sports fan loves. And I put it in the context that here in the United States, the NBA offseason is much more entertaining to most fans than the NBA regular season, because we spend the entire offseason talking about who's going to what team. Where is Kevin Durant going to end up? Where is Joel Embiid going to end up? Is he going to stay with the 76ers? There's so many different storylines. ESPN has created an entire monolith out of the idea of the transaction, and that's really what LIV Golf is trying to get to. And there are intriguing parts. I'm not going to deny that. Now, to your point, I don't think it's come close to resonating with the public yet, because I don't think we've gotten to where you can actually identify who's on what teams, who's exactly on the Majestics. I couldn't tell you, and I probably should know. But there is an element to this, and I think that this comes from the earliest vestiges of what they were trying to do, that they understood that team golf concept, specifically the Ryder Cup, was very successful, and they tried to find a way to translate that into something that would be
Ooh, just having a slight difficulty with the line. I think you're back though now. Can you hear me?
I can, yes.
So give us your last line again on the teams. Very last line.
I think it's having a hard time resonating with the public, and they're not there yet. But the idea is to create this team aspect.
What have you made of the production values, the television, the actual coverage versus what we get on the PGA Tour?
I have to admit, I'm kind of guilty of not having watched a lot of the coverage. I think I watched the first couple of events just out of curiosity, and I actually have some folks that I've worked with before that have gone over and started to work with LIV Golf, and I know they're trying to do some different things. And I think until, at least here in the United States, they get a domestic television rights deal, it's going to be hard. Talking with players last week, this comes down to two very, very important sort of turning points. One is, are they going to get world ranking points? And two, are they going to get some sort of television rights deal in the United States? They have some rights deals outside the United States. But without those two things, it's kind of hard to take them seriously quite yet.
I would say the TV coverage is actually fine. And you see a lot more golf because of Shotgun Start, and there aren't any ads, which I guess is a blessing and a curse, depending on whether you're a viewer or accountant with LIV. The commentary team are hilariously enthusiastic. I mean, to the point that they called Cam Smith's 65. Cam Smith, who shot a 64 to win the Open. They called his 65 at the weekend amongst the finest rounds of his life. So every birdie is greeted with wonder and great enthusiasm, and everybody is having a great time out there. That is made certain at all times.
Well, and I will say this: I kind of walked away from last week, and I was just talking about this on our podcast, that I was actually a little saddened, if I'm being honest with you, because having spent the majority of this year on the PGA Tour talking to players who remain loyal to the PGA Tour, and that starts with Rory McIlroy all the way down to Billy Horschel and everyone else who's standing with the tour, I came to the realization last week after speaking with numerous players that they're entrenched on both sides. Certainly those players that remain loyal to the PGA Tour feel like they are on the winning side, whatever that means in this particular battle. Feels like they're on the right side, feel like that history will look at them as being the ones that made the right choice. And I was taken last week, how many LIV Tour players feel the exact same way? How many LIV Tour players truly believe that they will get world ranking points starting next year, that there will be a TV deal next year, that they will continue to draw the top players from the PGA Tour? I don't know if any of that's true. I don't know how this plays out, but it gave me sort of a measuring stick of how far apart the game is right now.
I'm curious as to why you think, Rex, it hasn't captured the imagination whatsoever, because this is free to air via YouTube, and most people are Chromecasting or able to stream in some respect or other. So this is free in 200 countries around the world, and yet the viewing figures are appalling. I mean, I think at the weekend for the finale there might have been, a kind of steady base of 50 to 60,000 viewers, which is paltry when you consider the potential available audience. And I'm a bit like you. I've dipped in and out of it out of kind of idle curiosity at times. But for the vast, vast majority of golf fans, in spite of this very respectable field, and it's free for all, nobody seems to care. Nobody seems to have got engaged with the thing, really. Why do you think that is primarily?
Well, and this goes to the idea that they're trying to move this towards a younger demographic. They want to move towards a younger audience. I think we can all agree with that. And they're trying to capture that in a number of different ways. They're turning their events into parties. You could say the Shotgun Start, it's a shorter attention span. You're only requiring a fan to pay attention for a much, much smaller slice of time compared to a normal PGA Tour event or major championship. That being said, you mentioned at the top of this that I am of a certain age. And I can tell you that the demographics, at least here in the United States, are mostly towards an age that's above me. Even that when you talk about who's watching golf in the United States, you're 55, 60, 70 years old. I don't know if you spend a lot of time around 55, 60, 70 years old in the United States. They're not really good at finding things on YouTube or anywhere else on the internet. So I think it actually, technology is a bit of a stopping point right now. Like if you gave your average 70-year-old the option of turning on, I don't know, pick a network and watching LIV Golf versus having to find somewhere to turn on YouTube TV and search it up and figure it out that way, they're always going to lean towards the easiest option, which they've always done, which is network TV. So it's always going to be an obstacle until they figure out a way. And you look at the Formula One, what F1 did here in the United States by essentially creating this product, giving it to ESPN, and letting it nurture. And you can see it's very clear cut what they're trying to do and trying to create and going after a younger audience. It's clear that it's going to take some time, though.
Yeah. The reports earlier this year in September were that Apple had rejected taking LIV on its platform because it was, quote, too toxic. That was the reporting. And also, it does seem no network has jumped at LIV. There's no television deal on the table, to the extent that LIV are willing to pay a Fox channel to show their golf?
I think that's where they're going to end up. I mean, if you hear a lot of the rumors, and there was a lot of rumors going around last week at Doral, there's some other suitors that I think we'll probably need to pay attention to. I think Turner's name came up as an option, TNT here in the United States, the CW, which is kind of another cable network here in the United States, was surfaced. But I think Fox is probably their best option, because if you look at the inventory they have versus the inventory that's available for a Fox, for example, I mean, they still have to make room for LIV Golf if they decide to pick up and run with it. And they have a pretty extensive NFL football portfolio, college football portfolio, car racing portfolio. So they're going to have to work their way in to that lineup, but Fox Sports seems like the obvious landing spot.
The amounts of money, of course, are to the fore here when we talk about what's going on here. Dustin Johnson made $35 million on course, and his signing on fee is anywhere from 150 to 200 million. Pat Perez is almost being held up as the poster boy of the mediocrity required to make huge sums of money. So Pat finished no better than 16th in a 48-man field in all of the events across the year. 16th was his best. And he's made about $18 million this year, $8 million on the course, a $10 million signing on bonus. To quote Pat of the naysayers, "I really don't care. I'm paid. I don't give a damn." And that's, you know, he's like the personification of the LIV attitude. That said, with those amounts of money, Rex, there is no prospect of profit anytime soon. That I'm in and around the game and talking to people. Are they talking about LIV Golf making money at any stage in the next, I don't know how many years?
LIV officials met with some of the media on Saturday. They kind of had an informal meeting in the morning to kind of go over exactly what you're talking about. And there's been some pushback recently, last couple of months, about the idea that this is an unlimited well of money, that they're never looking to make this money back. There's been some pushback saying that they do want to, that the Public Investment Fund will want some part of this investment back. And it's really threefold how they get there. One, a television rights deal, which we just talked about. And at least in the short term, that's not going to happen. They may end up on Fox Sports 1, but that's going to be a pay-for-play situation, as we know. The other is some sort of corporate investment, which I know that that's been high on their radar. And then the third and probably most important element has always been sort of these franchises, that there's 12 teams, and each one of these teams will be worth something. I mean, a lot of these players bought into this concept based on the idea that they would have an equity share. My understanding is Phil Mickelson, for example, has a 25% equity share in his team going forward. So however much these teams are going to be worth is how LIV Golf and by proxy the PIF of Saudi Arabia are going to get their investment back. Like, I'm not very good at math, however. And if we are to believe that $2 billion is what they've invested or plan to invest, it's going to take a lot of franchise fees to pay that back. So at least in the near future, if not in my career, I don't see how they become profitable. That's for sure.
Right. Okay. It's funny you mentioned Mickelson's, you know, who really was proactive in getting this whole thing moving. His team, the High Flyers, I know you know he's part of High Flyers, of course, Rex. They were eliminated early over the weekend, and Phil did a stint in the broadcasting booth. And I suddenly thought, my God, like, his whirlwind appearances over the last couple of years, not least with him and Faldo and I'm Good at Two Things and all of this, you know, the brilliance he brings in a booth. I was thinking, actually, for LIV Golf, and it would be an awkward conversation to have with Phil, for LIV Golf, he'd be a far greater addition in the broadcasting booth as opposed to shooting a 74 on a Saturday.
I remember talking with his manager, Steve Loy, after he won the PGA Championship last year at Kiawah Island. And it was a time of celebration and it was a huge breakthrough in his career. But I told his manager at the time, like, it's actually extremely disappointing for me that he did this. And I explained the reason why is because he was going to go to the TV booth for whoever. Either it was going to be NBC or CBS or someone else was going to step up because he was that good. He'd already stepped in, as you pointed out. He'd done some cameos. He had the resume. He had the personality. He had everything we want for those people in the booth to be sort of the talking heads when it comes to golf. And him winning the PGA 2 years ago was just going to prolong that. It was only going to make him think he could play that much longer. Now, going to live, that's pretty, I think, right, in the long term, he's probably not going to play. 5 years from now, I wouldn't imagine he's still going to want to go out and be competitive with the 20-somethings that they'll have on LIV Golf at that time. And it will be a perfect scenario for him to step in and kind of be the voice of golf. I would be curious, looking back at it, and here in the United States as the example, Tom Brady, who is still playing in the NFL, has already signed a 10-year, I'm going to get this number wrong, but $350 million deal with Fox that when he's done playing, whenever that time comes, he's going to be an analyst for Fox Sports. He's never done it. He never did the cameos like Phil did. I would be curious that, and we can all say that Phil went to LIV Golf because of the payday. I mean, he's made that perfectly clear. I'd be curious what the difference in paydays were.
You mentioned official world golf ranking points. I guess this project and the caliber of player it can attract may live and die by the ranking point situation. In the short term, like, are they likely to have ranking points next year? And will we see all the LIV players, the top LIV players in the majors next year, or do we know? Like, come Augusta, are we expecting to see these guys taking part at Augusta?
I don't think, at least from what I've been hearing, Augusta or any of the other majors have any interest in changing their criteria as they stand right now. For example, if you finish at the end of this year and December 31st in the top 50 in the world, I would fully expect that player to get an invitation to the Masters, just like they do every year. It's sort of the rite of spring, so to speak, in that context. As far as world ranking points next year, and again, that's called the $1 billion question when it comes to LIV Golf, I don't think that they can come around fast enough for next year. And there is no motivation for either the World Golf Ranking or any of the other bodies associated with that, whether it be the PGA Tour or the DP World Tour, to expedite that process. Because the longer they, let's say, kick the can, the more those players are simply going to fall in the world ranking, and then it kind of becomes self-perpetuating.
Okay.
That the more players you have outside the top 50, the top 100, even if and when they do end up getting world ranking points, they won't have enough high-ranked players to make a difference with their fields. It'll be interesting coming towards the end of the year, and I talked with some players last week about this. Kevin Na, for example, he's 47th in the world right now, and he was trying to find somewhere to play before the end of the year to try to just scrap his way and stay inside the top 50. But it's very difficult. I mean, he does not have a lot of avenues.
And Rex, Greg Norman has been the face of this thing. He is the commish. I'm seeing lines and reports of late that increasingly he's less to the fore and perhaps his position could be under threat. Are you hearing anything along those lines? That would be an extraordinary development.
I've heard nothing but rumors when it comes to LIV Golf about Greg Norman and everything else. I mean, we can sit here and go through the litany of rumors. So I've learned through experience until it becomes real just to sort of to ignore all of the rumors that seem to be swirling around it. I will say that Greg, you're right. I mean, I saw it firsthand last week. He was not involved in any of the press conferences. He did not come into the media center. I saw him on property. But it seems to me he has taken a step back from the limelight. And given the fact that he hasn't been very good with the media and he's created more problems probably than solutions, that it's probably for the best.
So if F is a fail and A++ is couldn't have gone better, what's the Rex Hoggard end of year marks for LIV Golf year one?
Oh, I think I agree with a lot of the players that 6-7 months ago, it would have been hard for me to imagine ending up at Doral with what they ended up with the quality of the field. You pointed out at the top of this segment. I'm kind of tough when it comes to grades, but I give them a solid B, because I do believe that there's certain things, again, I'll go back to, without world ranking points and without a TV rights deal in the United States, it's going to be difficult to leverage even what they have now going forward. But based on how far they had to come, you have to give them credit.
Yeah, okay. Well, listen, fascinating to get your take on it all. Rex Hoggard of the Golf Channel. You can see Rex's work online and I'm sure on your TV screens as well. Rex, appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me on.